On this episode of How to Actually Change the World, we talk with Dr. Jennifer Ripley. Dr. Ripley is a Rosemary S. Hughes Endowed Chair of Christian Thought in Mental Health Practice and professor in the Regent University Psychology Department. We discuss her extensive work in psychology, specifically in the area of marriage. Enjoy.
Welcome to How to Actually Change the World. My name is Darvin Muentes.
And I'm Ray Pearson-Ben.
And we are your hosts, and we're excited because we have another great interview for you today.
Yes.
We've just been having such a good time, and this topic is very fun.
Yes.
It's something relevant for me,
Yes.
and relevant for all of us.
It's relevant for the both of
Yes.
us. And we're both in different stages.
Yep.
And so it's great for you all because you get to hear whatever stage you're in and benefit from what we learned today.
Yeah, it's exciting. So before we get into that, please like and subscribe, or go ahead and hit that notification bell if you're watching on YouTube. That way you can get notified every time we have a podcast drop. So without further ado, our first guest here today is Dr. Ripley. Dr. Ripley, please say hi.
Yay. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so glad that you joined us today. Please tell us a little bit about what you do here at the university.
Sure. I am the co-chair of the Charis Institute, which is an institute that focuses on ministry to marriages and families through churches and Christian ministries with a global focus. And I'm also the Hughes co-chair of Christian integration for School of Psychology and Counseling.
That's cool. So, before we get too far into what you do professionally, let's just do a little get to know you. Like what? So you're a chair of stuff. So you have a lot of different things that you're doing.
She's super busy.
You're a chair in multiple places, but you probably have a lot of other things that you
Chairs
do too.
of things. Never take a seat.
I love it.
Damn.
I love it.
Just came to me.
Oh, man.
I might steal that now.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your life. Do you have family?
I do. I have been married for 29 years to my childhood sweetheart.
Wow.
And we live here in Virginia Beach, and we have two adult children. One is at university, at another university, and our younger child is at this university, here at Regent University.
That's awesome.
As a freshman.
That's great. That's great.
29 years.
29 years
That's
together.
major success.
That is a lot of success, and that is really cool for our topic today.
We're going to rob you of some knowledge today.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. I mean, like you talked about marriage and family, and that's part of your professional world. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with marriage and family counseling, with marriage and family psychology,
As well as a lot of research. You've done a lot of research to prepare you.
Right,
Aside from day-to-day being married 29 years.
which is a lot of research.
That's different.
That's a great case study.
Different kind of research. So I love it. So I one of the co-creators of an approach to couples counseling called the Hope-Focused Approach to Couples Counseling. It is a Christian integrative approach. It is the most well-researched approach to couples counseling that is Christian integrative that exists. And it... We actually have a lab here at Regent University, and we have been seeing couples for 17 years over in the classroom building. We've seen over 500 couples, and we have done research on those couples, all of them, from beginning to end. So we capture lots of questions about their relationship when they start counseling, and then we ask them the same questions at the end of counseling, and then we follow them up 6 months later. And we even recently published a study. We followed people 2 to 10 years later to find out what the effects were of doing the couples counseling with us. And the effects were better than average, put it that way. So they were good effects for people who go through the Hope-Focused approach. So that's really one of the things that I do, and training students in that approach to counseling.
That's so cool.
I think that, as Christians, we know that God has us here on this journey of perfecting saints, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that marriage almost 13 years in. Thank you.
Praise the
Gotcha.
Lord.
Yeah.
I
In the
think
hard
that
years.
that was probably. I know.
It is. It is. It is.
But I think that probably this relationship that I have is the one that has changed me and grown me the absolute most, and you will see that it does. Can you tell me, as a Christian, how am I supposed to view marriage?
Great question. So, one view of marriage that you're kind of hinting at is marriage as a crucible, as a place for discipleship, really marriage and family life. There is nothing like marriage to get you to be insecure, sinful, just downright mean sometimes. Like, you don't think it's going to happen when you're engaged, but you have a moment and things fly out of a mouth or behaviors happen that you're like, I cannot believe that was in me, and so it really is a space for God to grow us and mature us as people. Because we often interact with our spouse or our children, our family, when we're tired,
Absolutely.
when the day is done, and there's just not much self-control left. And so that's a space where God can really say, okay, you think you've got it. You're doing well at work. You're doing well at, at church. You got your smile on
You
there.
got that mask on there.
Yeah, you're doing great. But then when you're home, all right, where are you?
I don't want to scare poor Donna.
I know all the engaged folks.
No, please.
Yes, you have to tell
This is-
everybody you are engaged.
Yes,
and so
I,
you will-
I am engaged. For everyone who doesn't know, I am very excited to
Yeah.
get married to
should
this
be.
amazing
Yes, of
woman.
course.
Yeah.
And actually, everything that you're talking about, I know in the theoretical. Like I've heard these things before in the theoretical, and obviously I don't have the experiential to actually like feel the feelings of the arguments, the hard times and the stuff. But like in the theoretical, and this is just kind of my view. Whenever I hear about the hard things, I'm just brought right back to like Christ is with us in the hard things too. Christ has not left me in the midst of the hard things, and He's called me to imitate Him in this world. And so, and when I see marriage, and when I hear you talking about it in that sense of a crucible, that makes sense to me. It makes sense, and I just haven't felt the feelings, and I'm gonna experience those feelings in the future. Which that is a little scary at times, but it's something that I desire because I know that my Savior desires for me to do that.
I do feel like during the time of my marriage, and you're right, we went through in the very beginning, I fairy tailed it in, I went running through the tulips into the marriage, and then all of a sudden I was in it, and it was it was not the fairy tale that I thought, right?
Right.
However, I do want to tell, if my husband happens to listen, certainly I find him every year in another, we go to a deeper place and fall in love with him in a whole nother way.
Sure.
When the kids came, oh my goodness, I fell in love with him in a whole nother way,
as a
watching
father.
him be a father and a good father and a good husband and an awesome provider. It just made me say, oh, I do love this man. And I think he found that in me too, watching his wife become a mother
Right.
and still be a good wife and be a great mother, have a great home, and I also work too.
Right.
And so I think
As
that
have I.
he was able to see me become something different than the person that we saw standing at the altar in front of our bishop getting married.
Right.
And so one thing I would say to you, and it's aside from what our plan was, I felt like during the process I've had a lot of dying to self.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor to really understand that life in a family involves a kind of reciprocity of being able to die to self and to your own needs in the moment for the sake of others, and to trust that God is going to show up.
Absolutely.
God is going to give you what you need. This is not that you're going to become some kind of, doormat.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Like
Some martyr.
Right, exactly. There's no martyr doormats here. Right?
Yeah.
This is a moment where wisdom
You've
is
met
needed.
Me. You know that ain't it.
All right, then. Good. So, all right, you know, like your whole life cannot be for others. There has to be reciprocity there, but at the same time, it can't also just be about me.
Absolutely.
And most of us as humans are kind of bent towards, well, what do I get out of this? Oh, I'm falling in love because this person makes me feel so special and important, or because this person just makes my life so much better. And if we get down to brass tacks, we kind of can see that in ourselves. I think that's a moment of illumination that God can work in our hearts to say, okay, what are you about in this world? Are you about the kingdom of God through your home? Or are you about your own kingdom, your own ideas, your own mission and vision of what you think life should be like? And that's a very different thing sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I didn't want to make this into any marriage counseling type session.
I know.
But I think that this is actually a really, really fun thing that I think our listeners would really love to hear. So for someone, and I think we have a varying range of like
Experience.
stages right here. I'm on the way to my wedding. You are 13 years in, and you said 29 years in. Could you give kind of like your thoughts in all your experience? I mean, you may have worked with varying levels, maybe 10 years in or maybe 25 years in. But the different pitfalls that people go into within their marriages, from engagement to kind of mid-marriage to mid-marriage again, you know?
Right. I think that's a great question. Let me hit with the marital emergency, is what we call it in the field of couple counseling, and that is the birth of the first child. So we call this the marital emergency because marital satisfaction rates drop for not just half, somewhere over 70%, particularly of women, but also men. Their marital satisfaction drops at the birth of the first child. So essentially in Western cultures especially, getting married is really fun, right? There's a wedding. Typically
Big
it's a fun.
party.
It's stressful, but it's super fun, right? And life changes some, right? As you live together and as you begin to have some decisions and some kinds of things together. But upon the birth of a first child, there's a bit of an emergency because there's so much change, right? A child requires so much energy. It requires an enormous amount of time. I remember nursing my first child going, I'm literally just feeding a child here. Like 4 hours of my day is just sitting here feeding a child. I'm doing nothing else. I can't do anything else, right? Whether you bottle or not, you have to just sit there with that child. So how am I going to possibly pull this off, right? I need your help, you know, and looking to the community some for help. So couples who do not have a great communication already, who aren't willing to do a lot of sacrifice, who think, well, we'll have a child and we'll just keep rolling, you know, they really can hit that cliff. So knowing that's going to happen does help people to make adjustments, to be ready for sleepless and all of the things that a new child brings. So that's really the biggest transition. Second child, there's a little research that says that second child adds another small marital emergency because now it's like, how am I going to sleep when I have this child who's awake running around at 3 years old and this other child who's...
You're right. It is such a change, you know, to first marry and have you change who you are because you become this union.
Right.
And then now two have become one. And now there's the one that shows up that says, hey, I'm the most important thing in your life.
That's right.
You're like, oh my God. And you're both running around like,
Yeah.
you know, and then you don't want to forget each other too. You don't ever want to forget each other. That's your best teammate.
That's
you know?
right. That's right. So that's the biggest marital emergency. But if you can build a teammate thing before, if that's possible, that really does help.
Yeah.
And this is done in just very small ways. So I have a great little story. My husband and I were both students at VCU when we started out. We were young. We had one car. We were super poor. Both students. We had
They were
nothing.
living on love.
We were living on love and loans, So we were students, and we had one car. We had to go into campus together, and whoever had the last thing of the day would go home. So we had to drive, commute together, right? Because it was a single car. So what we didn't realize was on that drive every day, it was, well, what are you doing today? Oh, how you have a test? Oh, you going to work? Oh, you'd check in on all the little daily the world that your spouse is living in, right? And he would check in on me, and we do that on the way there. And then we do that on the way back, that 10, 15-minute commute. Well, when we finished school and we had two cars, it was like living in the lap of luxury. My parents gave us a car. We thought that was the best thing. And so we all of a sudden went, who are you? Where are you? And these little moments of connection are really what matters. And so we had to have a new theme. We'd always done Friday night date night. We still do Friday night date night. But we had to have a little 5-minute date, instead of in the car, it had to be over breakfast or in the evening. But something like, what are you doing today? What's your world like? What are the details of your life? And this is so important just for everyday life. For a couple.
That's beautiful. You're still doing date night in 29 years.
We do. Tonight, we might go see my nieces, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like date night.
Oh my gosh.
It is.
Yeah. I love that.
We do love them.
And I think that's encouraging to me. Actually, Liana and I we recently
she got a shout out.
We haven't combined our
Smart
finances because we're going to do that when we're married, but
Yeah.
we have been doing it in the theoretical. So we just made a budget last night, and we looked into things, and when we finished it, I realized we don't have a date night on here. Why don't we have a date night on here? Let's get a date night on here. Let's make that happen right away. And so we put a date night on there every week. And,
good for you.
So that's very encouraging.
I'm impressed.
Things like that to be doing. So we're really excited.
Yeah, it's just fun. It's just going to dinner. It's going for a walk. It's biking, whatever you like to do. It doesn't really matter. It's just connection with each other and remembering why you're together as a couple.
Yeah, I love it. Well, if you've been loving this conversation as much as we have, please like and subscribe. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Did you know Regent is America's premier Christian university? In 2021, we received 7 distinctive #1 accolades. #1 online Christian college in America. #1 best online college in Virginia. #1 safest college campus in Virginia. #1 most affordable private college in Virginia. #1 online bachelor's in Virginia. #1 best value college in Virginia. #1 theological and ministerial online doctoral degree. Learn more about Regent University at www.regent.edu. Well, welcome back. We were having a really fun time talking about marriage and different pitfalls that happen in marriage and things that you can prepare for. And it's just been really fun so far. I don't know about you guys. I've just been enjoying myself.
You here today.
Yes, it's been so fun. So let's talk about some misconceptions. I actually, when we were prepping for this show, I sent you a couple questions. And one of the questions I sent was, why do Christian marriages have worse divorce rates than secular marriages? Which you very graciously pointed out, that's wrong. And that was news to me, because I think in popular Christian culture, we hear a lot that Christian marriages have worse divorce rates, that they're doing worse than secular marriages. And so I just kind of picked it up and then believed it. And then now you brought this up, so please go into it for us.
Sure. I'm glad to. First of all, a lot of those kinds of surveys are very basic. They will just ask people, what religion are you? And so when you ask someone just that level of question, you really don't get much information. There are many, many people, particularly in the United States, that would say, I guess, sure, I think I'm Christian. And
not practicing.
Not practicing anything, right? It's not a part of their life. It doesn't shape their marriage, their sexuality, their, that whole family life, parenting, that part of their life where it would have an impact. So, of course, it doesn't differentiate.
Yeah.
It's just a big glob, essentially. So that question doesn't help. But when you start asking some different questions, so one question people have asked is how often people attend religious services. Now, there's nothing magical about religious services, but it's a quick indicator of how much they are inculcating the faith into their life, right? Because if you're not going to church ever. But if you're going to church regularly, you probably are trying to have that inculcation of faith in your family. And the rates then drop. I mean, if the national average, and it's very difficult to tell, but somewhere around 40 to 50% right now, it drops down to somewhere between 6 and 15% of people who attend church regularly together. That divorce rate. So it's way down. But what's really interesting is a whole backstory about how people get married. So Scott Stanley is a researcher at University of Denver, really excellent, top-notch researcher. And he started something in his research called the slide versus the decide. Okay? So when entering marriage, one pathway that American couples tend to end up in marriage is called the slide. This is something like, I like you, you like me. Well, we're sleeping over at each other's house so often anyway. Why don't we just go ahead and share expenses and move in? And oops, we're pregnant. Oh, I guess we could have this baby. And then Grandma really wants us to get married, so we probably should. Okay. That's the slide. Nobody ever stopped to think: are we good for each other? Do we want the same things in life? Are we at a maturity level that we're ready to get married? None of that happened. It just kind of slid in, right? That's the slide. The deciders are stopping to think. Hey, we're dating. Are you good for me? Am I good for you? Right? Can we see a lifetime of love? Do we want the same kind of family life? And the same kind of mission, right? Same values. And so they'll make that decision along the way, hopefully with input from friends and family saying, yes, we also think this person's good for you too. And then they make a decision, right? And then typically in Christendom, it's called a wedding, right? It's a marriage. And then they move in together, right? But to be honest about the research, however, the research says if people get engaged and then move in together, which of course is not Christian teaching, but that the outcomes for that group, it's about making decisions, right, together, intentional decisions. They do better. So the sliders versus the deciders. And this is one of the reasons why you get such disparity between these types of couples and their long-term future. And that's really the predictor. It's not Christianity per se. It's how they inculcate that into the decisions they make in their life.
So it's about their actual life as a Christian. Are they actually a Christian person, or do they have this, this is just another label that they've thrown on themselves?
Exactly. Or is it a hobby, basically?
You mentioned something earlier in our first half about marriage satisfaction. And so over the years, they say that the divorce rate has risen to what it is now, right? And leading us to believe, of course, marriage has just declined so rapidly as years have gone by. However, I'm looking at it saying, were people just in marriages maybe back in the day with a lot of marriage dissatisfaction, but still married?
Yeah, I think that's some of it. So somewhere in the middle of the last century, the reason for marrying changed, right?
Okay.
So if we had talked to our grandmas and grandpas 150 years ago, right, the reason for marrying was, I need somebody to run the farm. We are, fourth cousins or something, we're but distant enough that it's not icky. Okay. Or whatever. Our parents are friends.
Still feels a little
icky. Okay.
Still feels a little icky, but that's all right.
They did do that. Yeah.
Yes.
You made the point.
Right. Or our parents are friends and have been for three generations.
Because your village was smaller.
Because your village was smaller. And the village would have a pretty common sense of values, ideas, and people would really know each other. They would know, that boy, he's a drinker and a little wild. I don't know if I want him to marry my daughter, and similarly the other way. So that was kind of the world that people married in. So they had some things going for them. For one, they really knew each other because they lived in small communities. And they also had a common sense of values, probably. Typically, they would have like one church in the little town, right? Or that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean they were satisfied. But they might not have thought that satisfaction was important.
Right. Okay.
They might not have made the jump from, I'm dissatisfied, this isn't right. They would have just said, I'm dissatisfied, I guess this is life. Life was hard, too. I mean,
You're right.
women died in childbirth all the time, things like that. Hard life. So now, since the 1960s particularly, if it's about, I need to feel loved and satisfied, and if I don't feel loved and satisfied, then the world is not a good place. Like, this isn't a good relationship. I think we as Christians have a real challenge there because love is the goal, right? That is the end goal of marriage and family life, parenting, all of it is love. To be characterized by it, that's sometimes sacrificial, but it also should be mutual. And there should be a sense of fairness. There shouldn't be injustice in a family. So those are important factors to all play out in a complex way. But at the same time, there's really interesting research. If you catch people who are dissatisfied in their marriage at a pretty low level, and you do nothing to them even, marriage counseling helps make things better. But if you do nothing and you catch them again 2 years later, they'll probably be satisfied.
Yep.
The vast majority.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. There's just a wave of satisfaction and dissatisfaction that is normative in family life. And you think of that with your siblings, with your parents. Like, in all relationships, there's
I agree.
times when you're just done with them. And then you get back on track.
Even self. Even your relationship
yourself.
with yourself.
That's right.
And it's just like, and so I do think it's a growth. It's sometimes you hit those growth spurts.
That's right.
And some growth spurts lead to growing pains.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's very interesting. And it does bring me back to, again, I think it does, that relationship that God ordained of marriage really was put in place, certainly to populate and to build more for the kingdom, but to grow you. Because it's required in order to keep the relationship healthy, that I have to grow in who I am beyond myself.
That's right.
Beyond myself, and now see my mate. And he needs to see me.
That's right.
And I think it's so beautiful how God takes you through all these changes at the stage of engagement, at the stage of 13 years in, at the stage of 29 years in, and the people who are celebrating our 50th and 60th anniversary.
That's right.
I think it's so beautiful that you can interview those people, and they have stories to tell where they got into an argument on the way. And it's so
right.
cute.
Yeah.
And you're like, you guys argue? And they're like, yeah.
Of course we do.
Yeah, there's actually really interesting research on perpetual problems, right? All couples have perpetual problems. I'll tell on my grandparents who were married for 60 years, and my grandmother's still living.
Wow.
But he was an introvert. His good idea was to watch basketball and garden, right? And she was an extrovert. She wanted to go play bridge with her friends in the 1950s. You know what I mean? Like, that was her idea of a good time, right? And she was just like, he never wants to do anything, and he just kind of rolled his eyes. That was just a perpetual problem, right? Like, how much they wanted to have people in their home and go out with others. And so there's an interesting way that we as Christians have to address that problem. You could see that problem as a sin, basically, right? Oh, you're being selfish, that I don't like to go out with your friends, or that I don't like to stay in by myself all the time, right? And you can get complainy, critical, defensive, even contemptuous, like there's something terribly wrong with you that you just like to garden, you're a horrible person. And people don't go down that path. But the calling of Christ, I think, for this. This is one of the aspects of couples work that I do is grace. Right? It's to see, and this isn't just the differences. It's funny about the introversion, extroversion thing, but sometimes it's really difficult things, chronic health problems, chronic depression, or character traits, being very insecure about things, and being able to have grace about that part of your partner, to protect it, to love that part of your partner, even though it causes pain to you sometimes, but to love it the same way we will love a part of ourselves that is insecure or peevish or whatever, that we're going with, and we'll be understanding and we'll be careful with that, right? And try to help it. So we can either be critical and attacking on our partner's weaknesses, or we can protect and be gracious. And that's important.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I love that. And that points right back to Jesus. What does he do? When he goes on the cross, he's taking pain after pain after pain of the people who he loves, and he's doing it willingly. He's taking that pain.
Not even here yet.
Yeah,
Those that are not even here yet.
Yes. And that's so beautiful. And I think that leads us right into my another question that I had. Could you give us a biblical definition of marriage?
Sure. I use the biblical definition of covenant marriage. And so covenant marriage assumes a few things. It assumes that the relationship is more important than the individuals within it. It assumes that vows and commitments will be kept, even if they're difficult to keep. That's a covenant marriage. It assumes that I will be for the good of you, right? And I will look out for the good of you in the details of the home, in the details of raising children, in sexual life, and all of those aspects of life, that I will be for your good and you will be for my good. And that we will trust that in each other.
Yeah.
And so that's a covenant marriage. There's a strong biblical kind of basis for that. Things like Hosea and Gomer, the stories of what biblical marriage is about. So I don't want to make marriage an idol, right? Because singleness is a good thing, and being covenanted to Jesus, and you alone is a really good thing. But when people are called into marriage, that covenant, and that's why when people violate that covenant, right? When the marriage counseling that I do, sometimes it's been violated in different ways. It's so painful and it's so even traumatic to people because there's these assumptions about what life is all about and this covenant that's broken.
I think that you segue perfectly, because I do want to ask you, when is marriage counseling necessary?
Every day, all day. Marriage counseling has no side effects. There's no dry mouth. There's no, but really, so my recommendation to people is maintain your marriage through things like date nights and the quick daily check-ins. Maintain your marriage by doing things like marriage retreats and marriage classes that your church might have, that sort of thing. That just keeps you with education and, that you don't ignore the marriage. So trying to keep it healthy that way. And then marriage counseling is good when you see a pattern and you've tried. Right? You've read a book, maybe you've talked to a mentor, maybe at your church or in your family, and you said, hey, we have this pattern. I'm trying. What do you think I should do? You try to follow their advice. That's not working. Marriage counseling offers something unique, right? To get the two of you in the room together, this objective person who says, let me try to teach you how to argue, how to communicate more deeply, how to share and take risks and have courage to share the things that you're kind of holding back from each other, and move to a place where you are able to forgive each other. A lot of my work is forgiveness work, and come out the other side with a transformation of the relationship.
Yeah, man. This has been such a fun conversation, and I don't want it to end. I think that we could dive into a lot more things. But I wanted to dive into this last question. This is a question that we ask of everyone, and we might have to have you back on the show later on to talk more about this stuff. But this question is, It's related to our show, our motto, Christian Leadership to Change the World. It's our namesake of our podcast. How does one actually change the world? From your perspective and the work that you've done, how does one person do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it can be done on a small level, right? So I think of like the marriage counseling that I do or the students that I supervise and they're learning to become couples counselors. That's done on a small level, right? So it's really in depth with one or two people. And I think that's very important not to underestimate that. A lot of people want grand things with 10,000 followers or something, and really in depth. I just want to emphasize how important that is. But I also think becoming excellent in your field, it's one of the things at Regent that I have always appreciated so much is this striving for excellence. We're not going to go halfway. We're really going to train students to be excellent at what they do. So when they go out there, they're like, oh, you really know what to do with couples work. You really know how to handle that couple who fights about their religion. And my alumni that I've trained, they are the go-to person in their community for those kinds of questions because other people are like, I don't know what to do with them, right? And so being able to be that influence, right, because of the excellent work. And then sometimes God calls you to a larger scale, right? So I'm headed to the American Psychological Association convention here, and they have this annually, and this is a mission field for me. It's a very secular field in psychology. And so there's presentations with students there, and particularly looking at some things like church response to women who've been sexually abused this year. In the past, presenting the hope-focused approach to counseling there. But it's a chance to influence the field. And I think that a graduate degree particularly, but a bachelor's degree does as well, gives you a chance to actually influence your field of work that you're in beyond your local community.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so fun. And yeah, we might have to have you back on for another one. And
I vote yes.
Yeah. If you liked that, and if you are a budding student, someone who is just graduating high school, you already have a bachelor's degree and you want to come get your master's degree, or you already have that and you want to come get your PhD, we have those here at Regent University. In psychology, we have so many great things, and you just heard from a brilliant person in that field. And so thank you for listening, and we hope that you would consider coming to Regent. Now, if you've been listening for a while now, or if you're just tuning in, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that way you can be told whenever How to Actually Change the World drops. My name is Darvin Wentes.
And I'm Ray Pearson-Ben.
And we were your hosts, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.
God bless.